Hey, in this episode, I talk with Jon Bryant. He is the founder of PaintScout, and we dig into sales data, close rates versus win rates, which is a concept he talks about that I thought was really good and helpful. He talks about what he's learned of what separates and distinguishes, reps that can do 2 million plus from others, what companies can also create structures to allow their reps to do that. Plus, we also talk about what a painting business can learn from a SaaS business, software as a service, and even how AI fits into the future. Really good conversation. Jon's a really thoughtful guy. Hope you enjoy. Jon, hey, thanks, man. Thanks for coming to the show. How are we doing?
Fantastic. Such a beautiful day here. Loving life.
You're in Canada. I was not aware that there was beautiful weather in Canada. Aren't you guys in winter all year round?
Yeah, I mean, it's all a sliding scale. Like there's still snow on the ground, but it's sunny. So you take what you can get up here.
Is there actually still snow on the ground?
No, you're in Minnesota, aren't you? You should know better. Come on.
I know. I think Daniel Tosh is a comedian. I don't know if you've ever heard this bit where he talks about Minnesotans, they talk a big game, the bold North, etc. And he's like, there's a whole country north of you. Like you're not that tough.
Right.
So yes. Great, man. Well, excited to have a conversation. And yeah, we were talking just before this. I think obviously founding a software business is a unique thing in the painting space. But you're a painting business owner as well. So I think your perspective is really interesting, and want to have a chat with you about just some of what you've learned and whatnot. But maybe just profile PaintScout for me. This is one thing I was curious about. Like, how many customers do you guys have? And then I don't know, like other platforms in the space. I don't know how friendly you guys are, but like, how does that like compare? You guys are pretty big. So, but yeah, profile PaintScout a little bit for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, PaintScout's a sales platform for painting contractors. I mean, it was designed out of a need I had many years ago, which was to do an on-site estimate for a customer in 10 minutes or less and present that price. And so that's what it was driven by. And, since then, it's been our goal at PaintScout to try to modernize this industry. And I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder, so to speak. I didn't like the industry for the longest time. I think a lot of people, whether we choose to admit it or not, there's just a view of our industry that it's not as professional as I think some of us would like. And so it's been my mission to try to bring some professionalization, at least in perspective, outward perspective to what we do, and to make sure that we have software that represents our industry really well. And so that's what drives us at PaintScout, is to try to change customers' perception of what a painting experience can look like and allow our customers to thrive in their marketplace. So that's what we do every day. And our software is, built for iPads, built for phones, so that you can do those estimates on site. And I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about the data today, because the data is fascinating once you present on site. But that was, a game changer, as much as I don't like that term, for what we did, and now for like a lot of contractors out there who have chosen that route for their business. So yeah, is that a good enough profile there?
Yeah, I love it, man. That's great. And obviously, at Aleph, we feel very, very similar. I think a lot of good voices are wanting to kind of bring the industry up, and that's like tangibly happening, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. Even the things, you're doing at PaintScout are part of that for sure. Give me an idea of the customer base. Like how many, like when you talk about data set, what are we thinking? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's one that we, internally, we've decided we're not advertising the numbers.
Okay.
We think it's a game that like it's a tough game because you can fudge it. And so
sure.
We don't like that. But what we can say is that we sell many, many hundreds of millions of dollars of painting. And
that's helpful.
That gives us a very good framework for what is good in this industry. We get to see some real top performers operate, and the data behind that's really fascinating. So Yeah, that's
Love it, man.
I know it's not the complete answer, but that's what we've decided here.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Give me the quick, like, how'd you get into the painting industry? PaintScout was not your first forte into the painting industry proper.
No, no, it was me blindly getting into this industry because, and I've told this story a few times before, but I still look back and think it's ridiculous, which is that I wanted to go bankrupt by the time I was 20. So like 3 days before the time I turned 20, I didn't have a business and I knew I had to make this thing happen. So I just asked a guy that I was playing university soccer with, and like, dude, I got to start a business in 3 days. What would you do? He's like, oh, I worked for this painter last summer and it seemed like it was pretty easy. And you should do that too. And so that's literally what I did. I said, guys, I hear you have water and I hear you have oil. That's all I knew. And the place where my buddy was wrong was that he thought it was easy. This is not an easy industry. And so I took it on the chin for a while. And if it wasn't for the fact that that I had, some loving parents that let me live at home way longer than they should have, a little more runway, I probably would have definitely met my goal of going bankrupt. So that's my story. And PaintScout came years later. Well, not that long later, but when we just ran into problems growing our sales team. And so as much as I'm not involved in the painting business anymore, that was really foundational for me to understand how to grow a business, grow a sales team, and really what as painting contractors we face every day. So it gave me a good framework for that.
So did you have any kind of, no prior connection to painting? It was kind of, let me go into this. What did you know about software? How were you, was it similar of like, oh, let me just start a software company?
I wish it was that easy. And in fact, it's funny. I joke that if I were to go back, I probably would not do the software thing. It's been okay now, but it is a massive undertaking, as I'm sure you guys understand too. Like software is not, it seems glamorous from the outside, but internally it's just, you're burning money and you're like trying to figure out how to pay for this stuff. It's a tough game. So my experience was that after a couple of years in the painting industry, I desperately wanted to leave. Like I just couldn't handle it anymore. I have a finance degree and I didn't like the perception I was getting from my friends who are also in finance, a lot of them in investment banking. And so I tried to get out. And part of that was that I ended up being a marketing manager at an app company, a job I should have never had. Like I was not qualified. But you meet someone at a wedding, someone likes you, they give you an opportunity. And then 6 months later, they're bankrupt. And you think, oh, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So I didn't want to paint. And I had this little experience in software where I kind of ran a small team and understood how that worked. And so at the end of that, when they went bankrupt and I had to make a decision, I just flipped a coin. And heads was painting company and tails was web development. Came up heads. I cussed a bunch of times and was like, well, I guess the coin is decided. And I did not go into building this software thinking that that's what I would do. I built it more out of a need, and a need that not only I was facing, but a lot of other people that I had since networked with were also facing. And so it became clear to me that if I could solve that for at least a small group, that would be good. And it turns out when you need a lot of money, you're like, how am I going to fund the rest of this thing? I guess I better try to help more people. So that's really how it came about. And, there's been a lot of learnings. One thing I'm very passionate about is design. And so throughout the reason I got the job in marketing is because I got design skills that are self-taught. And that's really an important element for me. And so I was able to design PaintScout to meet our needs from the design perspective, which is so critical when you're dealing with a problem as complex as we deal with in pricing paint jobs. And so
Sure.
that combo of having some relationships in software and knowing how to design and be able to design those first iterations of the software was really what was the special sauce, I guess, to make it happen.
Yeah. And what year did PaintScout start?
We okay, so we've started under a number of different names, which is important to understand. And then PaintScout would have been, I think, as it's known today, 2021. But there was a couple iterations that started in 2018. So
Okay.
I'd say, what is that? 7 years?
Yeah.
7 years old. Yeah.
So I'd be curious, like, kind of one foot in the painting industry, and then now you learn software, and that's a different industry. It's a totally different game. This is one thing I talk to people about, and I think about as well, is like, a little background.
Yeah, a little background noise. Is it okay on your end?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all good.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
You're good. So yeah, one thing I talk with people about is I think one of the things that we've done a good job of, I believe, at Aleph is just embracing a painting company for what it is. So I think you can get in trouble. Like, there's lots of good things that you can learn from cross, different industries, but then it's also like you got to understand the game you're playing and then figure out how do you win that game. And you can't win another game, in that one. That being said, like, what do you think painting businesses could learn from software businesses? Or I'd be curious, just being in both worlds, what you would think of that.
I think, I've never been asked that question before, but really, what's important, I don't think we fully consider with painting contractors, is how the customer experience works. And so a lot of times we feel like, you go in, give the bid, get the job, do the work. And there's ways to actually make that more seamless for customers. And through the software space, you start to see ways that software can complement the customer journey and make that a little bit easier for people, and such that they start to feel like it's a little more seamless. Communication's a little more seamless. The job goes off a little easier. It's easier to pay. There's ways to start integrating that stuff. And I think the more that we're exploring what software can mean, the more that we're seeing that how that can change a painting business's customer experience. So I think that's a big eye opener for me, at least.
That's great. I think that's that's definitely again, kind of on this topic of like embracing the business you're in. I think internally we talk a lot about like we're in the not necessarily like not so much even customer service. Like, yes, of course, but a way of thinking of it is like client experience. Like that's the game that we're playing. Yeah. And right, a paint job is you need to think of this as an experience. And that's the primary thing that they touch. They don't primarily touch. I mean, obviously they enjoy the paint job and they want all of the warm fuzzies of the craftsmanship that you're going to do, but like how they interact with you, their communication, like what do they touch? They touch, like, what are the experiential parts that they touch? And yeah, totally. Software, it's all about UX and big focus. So I think that's great. Okay, some data. So maybe like let's start on the sales side of things. And I think you maybe gave a talk somewhat recently on some of this stuff. So maybe this is fresh, but like I'm definitely interested, and this is something, we have 20 partners, 20 Aleph partners. We're seeing kind of data and trends, and obviously we're trying to learn from that of, okay, what sets salespeople apart, project managers apart, marketing campaigns and different, all kinds of things. On the sales side, what are some like big trends? I'd be curious and what you want to share, what you don't, but like kind of like maybe if you'd put into tiers of thinking of like how much should a salesperson sell, like investing in that role. It's like, I don't know if there's tiers of like A players, B players, C players, or how you think of it, but just in terms of like in a calendar year, how much should a salesperson sell? Like, what are you seeing across your businesses?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, like the A player, B player, C player, so to speak. is, it's been an interesting exploration for us at PaintScout to see how people perform and where really excellence lives. And I think it's one of the first times we've actually been able to see what is excellence, for one, and how did they get there. And I think there's a lot of, you mentioned this before we got talking, it's just, there's a lot of people with theories, like here's what you should do. And there's not a lot of the, let me show you why that works. Like, here's the extrapolation of that activity and how it actually impacts your data. And that's one area that I'm super fascinated in, and drove that presentation that you heard, which is, the secrets from the $2 million sales rep club is what we called that presentation. And, we likened it to running a 4-minute mile, and how, a lot of people didn't think that was possible until one person did it. And then you now have, people running it yearly because they understood how it was done, and they could see the intervals the person ran at and how to train and all that kind of thing. And so when you're talking about A players, B players, C players, what's interesting is, I think in sales, I think we all want A players. A C player on the team isn't the best thing. And you're going to see tension on your team if you have A players and C players. But I think the length of experience matters. And so I think if you have the sales capacity, we need to understand what metrics make sense at different points in the journey. So are you going to come into the painting industry and sell $4 million next year, fresh into it? Probably not. We haven't seen that in the data. That would be a real unicorn. But are you going to come in as a strong salesperson and sell $1 million? Absolutely. That is doable. In fact, I think that number can be closer to 1.5 million for a strong sales rep, good support, and at least a team that can produce it. That's really critical. So I always like to see it that way. It's that, if you have a C player on your team, it may not be the right fit. If you have somebody who's new, who's working their way up to be at that premier level, I think that can work. But we need to understand those metrics, right? What do we expect from the first 30, 60, 90 days from a sales rep to show they have what it takes to be a $2 million sales rep unicorn? Or let's change that and say, just let's get rid of the unicorn. We want a bunch of $2 million sales reps in our industry, and we want to take that away from being special. So I don't know. Does that answer that?
Yeah, I love that. What I kind of hear in there, and maybe you correct me if this isn't exactly what you're saying, but you kind of only want A players. It's like C players probably are not the right fit, and you likely need to transition them out in a healthy way. But there's a difference between, an A player is going to perform differently in year 1, year 2, year 3.
Correct.
They're an A player. They're always an A player. It's just, you got to, as a business owner, you got to have good, healthy expectations of performance based on experience. And certainly we know for our people, we're predominantly in res repaint, though everybody does a little bit of commercial, light commercial, things like that. And so accounts are a big thing, right? So in building up relationships over a couple years, 3 years of consistently building into, property managers and GCs and things like that in your spare time. In year 3, they might throw you, 100 to $1 million of work. And that can be such a big supplement versus all the other more of the kind of standard bids that you have to go on. So yeah, I think we see that quite a bit. How about success rates? So, and maybe too, and I don't know, as we chat about this, I'll maybe kind of share on our side too, of definitely year 1, kind of that 1 million to 1.5 is certainly what we would target. That 1.5 is very reasonable. Sometimes there can be factors. I'm really glad that you mentioned production, especially if they can produce it, I think you said. And that's something I want to circle back to later. So there can be, I think there's some factors that an owner needs to be honest about in terms of what is within the salesperson's control and what isn't. But I would say that, that 1 to 1.5 is certainly what we target too. How about success rate? what are you guys seeing on that?
Yeah. So I think like I heard this saying years and years ago about, and this was before I had any data, which is that, some will, some won't, so what? And the ones that will are probably 30% no matter what. The ones that won't are 30%. And you're kind of fighting for that 40% in the middle. If you can get 50% of the 40% in the middle, you're doing a great job. And I heard that, just anecdotally, like this is what you should be shooting for. And the data actually, it does support that. And so top reps are closing in around that 50% range. And what they're doing though, which is interesting, is there's win rate, which is that, 50%, you're winning 50% of the jobs you bid on. But close rate is very indicative of your win rate. And so we talk about these two terms independently. And
how do you differentiate them?
So a close rate is just getting yeses and nos. And so the close rate, if you can get closer to 100% close rate, the likelihood of you getting closer to a 50% win rate is way higher. And so what that tells you is that good sales reps make the conversation comfortable enough so they can get a yes or a no from a customer or potential customer. And they also follow up. I know follow up is kind of, for some people, like an F word. Like it's a bit of a follow up. But if you set it up properly, where you're serving your customers and you're setting those expectations that, my job here is to get answers. I might not be the right fit. And you're having those discussions. That alone is enough to take someone who's at a 40% win rate and push them to a 50%, because they are going to close out more of those deals with yeses and nos. And so those are interesting metrics to look at. So when we see reps that are not getting the win rates, immediately we go to close rate. Like, are you getting answers on your jobs? Because if you're closing out 60% of your jobs, that's why you're down at 35, 40%. So these two things are very correlated for good reps.
That's really good. You're moving people along to a decision, and that's really your job. Help them decide, and obviously you want to influence them to decide for you. But it's kind of, there's also this reality of, what you bat 400 or 300, you're in the Hall of Fame in the MLB.
Exactly.
There's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I think that's really clever. Do you guys track that in PaintScout? Like, you differentiate between those two? How do you, I'd be curious, and that would be a pretty, whether folks have PaintScout or not, I feel like that'd be a pretty easy, if you have any kind of like weekly rhythm with your salespeople, you could track that. But how do you, have you seen best practices on how to make sure sales guys aren't like fudging that? Like, if they forgot to follow up, it's like, oh no, they're not going.
So totally, and where you see it is actually that they will self decline, and so you got to get the key in it's trusting and verifying with a lot of this stuff. And so it's like, I trust that was a decline. What was the reason? And so they're like, oh, price was too high. It's like, oh, okay, now we have something to work off of. And if you're actually lying about that, I'm going to make your life pretty painful, because we're just going to talk about how to talk about price all the time. And that's going to be tough for you, because you're going to be like, wait, it wasn't actually price. I didn't follow up. And so I think that's a big thing, is like figure out the why as well. Like, if you're like, that answer was no, you're going to see it in the win rate for one. Be like, how is your follow-up? Like, how is your ability to get decisions here? And if they're batting, 1,000 for closeouts, now we have so much data to work with to figure out how they're actually potentially making errors. And if they're lying about that, it's going to become very clear very quick.
That's great. And I think too, it's good for amassing data around no's, almost like lead attribution for like what was the cause of the no, and then like correlating that to, I think that can help owners too, of like sometimes, and I think this is generally like a good posture. I forget where I heard this, but they were talking about sales, and it's like, no literally is the job. Like the reason you have a job if you're a salesperson is because no exists. Like your job is to get past the no. So like if you're just like, oh, they said, you know, if you're demoralized by no's or you don't know what to do with no's, you're probably not in the right seat or profession. So I do think there's healthy accountability and tension to like make sure your salespeople aren't exaggerating like the reasons why they're getting no's. But that being said, I think if you do have an A player who is getting good data on our price is too high or our timing sucks or whatever, like for an owner to humbly be like, all right, maybe they actually like they have a point, you know?
Absolutely.
Not like, oh, they're not performing, you know? It's easier if you have data though.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can start to see issues in your system. I think at some point, ride-alongs with those people are super helpful because they start getting a bunch of no's. Then you go on a ride-along and you ask them previously, like, how was your discussion around the fact that there's lots of painting companies and you might not be the cheapest, and then you find out they're not doing it. And so sometimes these are indicators of a little bit of management, a little bit of that verifying. And so doing a ride along, seeing how their process is working. I believe that when we talk to at least top sales reps, these guys have a process. It's not random, and it's all about staying consistent. And so, there's a lot of different sales structures and processes out there, but having one matters, I think. So you have something to at least verify at the end of the day.
Do you find that, or would you say, like, do you find a correlation between the sales reps that are selling the most that they are with the biggest companies? Like, like I'd be curious because I don't know, you could have, let's say you had a sales or somebody who's selling $3 million and maybe they're the only salesperson. So it's a $3 million business. And then you have a $5-6 million business with a bunch of people selling, 1 to 1.5 or something like that.
Yeah.
Or not. I'm curious if you've seen any kind of correlation to, what companies are the top performers at? Are they at the biggest companies all over the place?
So, let's break that down a couple of ways. Because what we said earlier about like you got to be able to produce it is key. So if you're at a bigger company that can produce more work, you have more opportunity. But the way I define elite in our industry is someone who can sell 2 million plus, at least right now. Like that's an elite person. And I don't think you have to be at the biggest company in order to hit that mark. I think there's a lot of $2 million businesses out there, and it's potentially a business owner or one sales rep managing that. And that's doable. But if you want to be able to sell, call it 10 million in work, well, you got to be probably at a pretty big company in our space. So that would be my answer with that. I don't know. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah. Well, that was like a specific question I wanted to ask you was, we have a saying internally, sales are for show, production's for dough.
Yeah.
And not how much you sell, it's how much you produce that pays the bills and keeps the lights on, right? And I was curious, like, have you seen good sales teams, great sales individuals hindered by poor production? Like, I don't know, have you seen scenarios like that and if there's, I don't know, any learnings from that, or curious what you've seen on that front?
I mean, there's a few things that happen. One, like poor production is really demoralizing for a sales rep. Like you sell something believing that you can do it at a high level, at least that's what you told the customer, and then your team goes and completely messes it up, and now you've got emotional damage from that with the customer. So that is for sure. Like when you say, what was the saying? It's sales
sales are for show, production's for dough.
Totally. Yeah. So we, some of the great companies in our space, and I'm sure you guys are really into it with this too, but you got to know how your sales reps teams are performing once they do the job. So like if you have a sales rep selling, they can go both ways, right? Like you have a sales rep selling jobs and it gets to the production team, and that can be demoralizing because they don't have enough time. If you're subbing it out, there's not enough money. And so like all of a sudden you've got this crazy tension going on between sales and production. And that's tough. That's really tough. So it's almost like this finely tuned orchestra in a way where like your salespeople are semi, conducting, but the production team has to be able to actually follow what's being done to a level that they're proud and they can get it done on time too. So yeah, it's a dance for sure.
Yeah. And I think we, with the software that we've built, Wallogy, I think you mentioned like tension between sales and production. I think there is a degree of healthy tension. Like there should,
sure.
It's like if our sales people were the ones, writing, work orders and selling jobs and stuff like that, they'd probably underprice it because they want to get the sale, right? But if production was the ones that were writing proposals, they would, qualify the customer into the ground, and they'd, cover, don't expect too much here. Don't expect too much here, want to make sure that they got room. So there's healthy tension, back and forth, but I think, creating dialogue, like tension that creates dialogue and problem solving, as opposed to tension that, demoralizes, eats into culture. I think that's really huge. And again, back to like data, we found there's just no substitute for data. If you don't have clear data on like why was margin lower on this job, or what are the trends on complaints, or if there's anything going wrong, then everybody's just opinions and feelings, and that's not like, that tends to not be productive, very productive.
No.
Some tension is good, but
totally agree. And I what you're saying is 100% true, in that without that tension, the company just doesn't exist. I think like you can't get customers, or you're never going to make any money. And so that tension is really where your profit lives. And without that, you can't get there. So, fascinating. And I think, a lot of these guys that are selling a lot more work are with companies that have systems, I would say, and have an understanding of where at least their gross profit lives on jobs, like how's this impacting business, and whatever way you measure that, whether it's through the hours of the job or just pure costs after, you need a metric for doing that to see how that tension is working. So, yeah.
When you have looked at the top performing reps, is there like a pretty clear like hiring profile that emerges, or is that kind of all over the board in terms of traits, previous experience? And I don't know how deep if that you've gone on that, or if it's just more observational, but I'd be curious your thoughts on that too.
Yeah. So when we did this case study, we interviewed probably 10 of the reps. And at the time we did this in 2024. So there was about 50 reps selling $2 million on the system, I think. And I'm hoping I get that number right. Anyways, it's we interviewed 10 of them and talked to them about disc profiling, and did you do any personality assessments? How did you get this job? How did you find out you're good at sales? And my assumption was always, find someone with, like, if you're doing a disc profile, do you guys do those at all?
We do.
Okay, yeah. So like high D, high I, like they're coming in, they don't have, they're so driven that they don't have a lot of emotion. It's like that's what you want, and we didn't really find that exactly. That was not confirmed in our 10 people that we talked to. Small sample size for sure, but the hypothesis was not confirmed. And one of the interesting things is that some of the top performers had profiles that were very different. And so one of those people was my brother, actually. And so I've had a chance to see how he operates. He has pretty much 0 D, 0 I. I don't even know, like, when we actually talked to the consultant, it was like this can never work. It's impossible. And he got out there, and he is, last 2 years have been top 5 in our entire community. This year he's pushing for, he's kind of on the cusp of number 1. And what he does, what really drives him is competitiveness. And that's seen, like he was an athlete for a long time, and he's just highly competitive. He'll push to win. He'll push through all of that like personality issue just to win. Like he's so driven. And so we wanted to inspire everything we could to give him data and give him like information on what greatness looked like. And he's just like wants to crush it all the time. And so, is conflict his strongest suit? Absolutely not. But is he willing to ask for the sale because it might help him win? Absolutely. And so we've seen this now in a few cases where people who demonstrate a story in their life of competing, whether it's through being an athlete or some other endeavor that caused them to show competitiveness, really plays a factor into whether they can be a good sales rep or not.
That's super interesting. You share that. Our the VP of Sales and Marketing here, kind of thought leader on sales inside Aleph, is Micah Stelter, and he has obviously hired and trained and seen a lot of reps over the years, and has distilled kind of his profile of what he is looking for. And I remember he posted it online, and somebody kind of disagreed with one of them. Mm-hmm. And it was, again, I think, and it was around this point of a star salesperson's got to be kind of mavericky. Like they got to have a little chip on their shoulder, and they're going to, get theirs and that kind of thing. And Micah's point was, this particular point was, they need to be highly compliant. And that was what the person was. It's like, no, the salesperson needs to be like kind of their own self-starter, whatnot. Mm. And Micah's point is, I have a proven process. Like I know this process works, right? Like there's clear data on if you verbally ask for the job, mm-hmm. Whether or not you book that job that at that moment, the likelihood of you eventually booking that job is significantly higher because you're showing intent and you're drawing objections. Like it might be all pleasantries, and then you say, great, can we get this scheduled today? I'd love your business. Oh, well, I'm waiting for one more bid. It's like, oh, you didn't tell me that, or whatever it is, right? And so Micah's kind of point of like that compliance is, I just need you to follow this process because I know it works. Mm-hmm. And I don't know too, if in your brother, there's just a little bit of that of like, I'm not asking for the sale because I'm like, I love just getting in there. It's just, I know that if I ask for the sale, that's how I get the sale, and I want to win. So I'm going to ask for the sale. Exactly. A little more simple.
I think so. Yeah. Managing, that term maverick, I think is, it sounds all nice, but you got to manage the team as well. And if you're looking for one sales rep and that's all your team is going to be, that might work, but it's still going to be challenging. And so I think there's elements of maverick that go against teamwork and can be harder to. I mean, we've seen this through a lot of the contractors we've interacted with, where they get someone who's strong, but they become a bit of a diva. And I don't think you're looking for that either. So compliance, teamwork, following a system. Like I said, they all have a system. They're all following a system. The ones who follow it best seem to be the ones that win more. And it's not really rocket science, but some people are very uncomfortable asking that question. And I don't know if it's compliance issue or it's like fundamentally, maybe it's money mindset, maybe it's insecurity, maybe it's like desire to not have conflict. I'm not sure what it is, but top reps are willing to ask the questions, whatever that means. And I think you're right. Like what Mike is saying is true, is that asking the question is what matters. That's all that matters. Like, let's get a yes or no. And if you can't get it to that, if it's all pleasantries, if it's all emotions, you're not going to win jobs.
Yeah, and again, I think I've hearing Micah talk about this, especially again, try to win the game that you're playing. Like the
Mm-hmm.
game that you're playing is, especially in an exterior-ish focused company in a seasonal climate like the Midwest, right? This is where we've kind of cut our teeth. Uh, our flagship business, Paris Painting, does like the majority of its work, like the lion's share of its work, in 6 months out of the year. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of appointments you're going to go on. It's a marathon. Like
Mm-hmm.
you got to get decisions, and you need to almost like in a healthy way detach from the answer to that question
Yeah.
and just get that question. Like you're trying to get to your yeses.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I think that's helpful. How about like on this topic of kind of enabling or hindering sales teams and sales performance? You mentioned production, kind of that if the customer experience is down, that can be really demoralizing. What else have you seen either on either side of the coin? Like if you've seen companies, and maybe there's data or maybe just anecdotally, companies that you've seen sales teams and sales individuals perform well, and if you could put your finger on something that was different about them that enabled that, or other sales killers that, hey, I might have a good profile, I might have a good human here, but I'm just throwing logs in front of their path and tripping them up. I wonder on either side of those if anything comes to mind.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we don't get what's interesting on the data side is we don't get a lot of those insights. Like we don't always understand why it isn't working, but we can see because we didn't really study that. Like really, what we studied was how it does work. And so I would say like, some of those the exact opposites of the reasons why it works is probably the reasons why it doesn't work. So like, no system, no training, no company support of any type, um, no accountability because you don't know the numbers, uh, not closing out jobs. Like these are things that likely are the causes, but I can only deduce that because of what I'm seeing from the success.
So maybe the flip side of that, like your most successful customers have pretty robust training, like sales training, things like that. What else are you
Mhm.
seeing? Like characterizes these top performing businesses?
So if I were to imagine some of the top businesses that we work with, they'd have several reps in the $2 million mark. And if we were to look at their process, they're dialed in on their pricing. So they know how to price jobs through production rates. And so they're measuring, they're counting, they're giving a system to their team to price quickly. They're always, it seems like when we talk to people, they're always talking about price with the customer on the spot. So they have an ability to either generate an exact price or get a framework around the price in order to get real answers from the customer. They are consistently meeting. So they're consistently talking about how they're doing. They're looking at the data that they have. They're trying to help and manage and coach their teams or the individuals on their team. And they're also setting goals. So a big part of it is like all of these top performers talk about the goals they set. And those goals are around sales, but they're also around activity. So like, how many estimates am I doing per week? How many calls am I making to people in my network? What is my day and week, month, year, quarter, all that stuff looking like to make sure they're on target? And so I think a lot of that comes down to set that goal and then monitor as frequently as possible to make sure you get there. Um, so yeah, I think does that help? Okay, I mean
Yeah,
like yeah,
yeah.
you
No,
sense
I
good.
think I think those things they make sense, right? I think the systems, um, the repeatable process, goal setting, review, all that makes sense. I think it feeds too of a more mavericky salesperson. I think that can work in the early stages, but that's not scalable, right? That's the problem with it. If you want to scale a team, it needs to be far more process orientated, and hence training and accountability and rhythms and those kinds of things. So that totally makes sense. One last thing I wanted to get your take on is AI. I'm kind of trying to weave that conversation into as much as I can.
It's a random AI drop. Yeah. Let's chat about it.
But just being in the tech space, I'm curious how you guys are thinking about that. I'm curious, just your perspective of obviously just technology being your core focus and being really keen to user experience. I'm just curious how some stuff you hear is like I'm in a group chat with some friends, and it's kind of, I don't know, the conversation has been AI focused, and it's Anthropic's Claude, tried to blackmail blah, 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 right? There's these fantastical stuff. And then there's just real simple, practical helps and aids and things like that. So curious how you guys are thinking about that for PaintScout in general. And then just even if you're seeing good uses of it, interesting things around that topic.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting discussion because, there's two things at play. There's what AI can do, and then what we can teach our people to use AI for. And
how do you differentiate between those two? Like flesh that out for me.
I mean, there's ChatGPT, and there's like knowing how to use ChatGPT, right? Like the prompts are really important to like figuring out how to use it to get what you're looking for out of it are really, really important. And
sure.
That does seem to be, in some cases, a barrier. Like learning technology is hard. There's those that are more like tech forward, but if you were to drop my grandmother into this and be like, okay, build an estimate and now learn how to use AI in order to interact with this thing, she can barely turn on her computer. And so, we got to understand who what our customers' capabilities are. And so like there's some very interesting things that I think AI will be able to help us do in the future in terms of being able to streamline some of the processes. But one of the things that gets in the way is just the access to data. So the, measuring of jobs, like if you were to look at like in the commercial space, something like maybe Bluebeam or something like that, I think AI is going to change that game really, really fast. Like load in some type of blueprint, and it'll tell you all the stuff really fast because it's really good at that.
Sure.
Versus having to manually go through and pick out all the stuff you're doing. So I think processes like that where we can get the data and process it for us is going to be really helpful. If you are trying to ask AI to price the interior of a home, there's a lot of barriers that get in the way. And not that you can't get like something close, but where's the data coming from? How does it know maybe what your labor cost is in your area? How is it deducting all of that stuff? I think that may come in the future, but right now it's still pretty loose because we don't know the condition of the home. We don't know the customer's preferences. And so just because we have a price doesn't mean we're creating the job the customer wants. So we've done a lot of deep digging into this. I think, measuring, getting that data is something we'll be able to do well. But in our space, in the sales space, it's as much of an art as it is a science, and that you're building a product for a customer like in the process of meeting with them. And I don't know how well AI can do that, except it probably can help you write the proposal really nice.
Sure.
So, yeah. Does that align with what you're seeing, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there is like a big thing that gets popularly talked about is like people can start their like small businesses because they're all AI enabled.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a problem with that though, is that throughout history, the best entrepreneurs have been like problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
Like they see a problem, right? They see where they can create value, and then they figure out how to meet that need.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like just a certain way of looking at the world. And I think that if you don't have that, like you mentioned earlier, and I would imagine the best, and I'm sure of this, the best painting companies, like the most successful and most like profitable, stable, probably biggest painting companies understand the customer experience. Like that's the value that they're bringing to the market. That's what they're solving for. And there's like a way of looking at the world that sees it that way. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
think like that and you don't have eyes like that, I don't care how many tools you have. To your point, you're just not going to be able to know how to use them to actually be on the problem. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I think part of this is like just learning what can I use this tool for.
Mm-hmm.
And like just very simply, I've been using ChatGPT a bunch. I love it. But I'm just like, I feel so dumb all the time of like, oh, what else can I do? And then I find things like just using the camera. Like I'm sure a lot of people use this a lot more, but I do so much processing with my eyes where I see something and then that triggers all kinds of thought and analysis. Like if I see a price in a
Mm-hmm.
store and I'm like, is that a good price? Is that a bad price? I don't know. What else do I know? It's like, well, ChatGPT is way better at that. Is this a
Mm-hmm.
good price? Or whatever.
Yeah.
Silly like consumer example, but I think that's just like, what can it be used for? What is it going to be good at? What is it not going to be good at? I think we're still figuring that out for sure. But I do think it's very important for business owners to be using it, like be a practitioner, and figuring this stuff out.
I saw an interesting. I've seen a couple of emails now coming out from different tech CEOs about the use of AI and warning their staff about the implications of not learning how to use it, and saying like, not only is this important for you, but I as CEO, it's coming from my job too, and I got to figure out how to use this. And I think if as simple as spending some time understanding what it is for anybody who hasn't already done that, it's going to go a long way. And you're going to be able to use it. Like emails is just, it's so effective for writing emails, for communication, building like SOPs and, like different job descriptions. And like, it just is so powerful. And we all need to understand that. But when it actually comes down to like a sales space for painting, we've had a lot of internal debate as to what the value is and how to make that accessible, right? Like,
Sure.
what does that look like? How does it work? It's not as simple as the problem presents itself, because a lot of this is judgment calls, especially when it comes down to more complicated preparation or customer needs. Like you need to be trying to serve your customers well, and I don't think it can do that precisely. So, but yeah, like if you don't know about it, check it out. You better check it out today, because in 6 months, your competitor is going to be ahead of you using this for a lot of things. And that is going to give them an edge for sure.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, regardless of what the end stage practical kind of landing spot is on the use case, one thing that's crystal clear is that AI is useless unless it has data. Like data is the oxygen of AI, right? So I do think there's this element of companies that don't have good data, they don't have clean data, they don't have robust data, they have kind of either siloed or like they have data in one area of their business and not in their others. I do think there's going to be this element of like the rich getting richer a little bit of the more good, clean data that you have on your business today, the more AI is going to be able to help you, because that's what it feeds off of. And so, like, not even just using AI, it's like if you don't have data across your company, you're not even going to be able to use it. It's going to be kind of useless to you in a lot of ways. And And so, yeah, I think we're fascinated. Obviously, we care about data. And I'm sure your customers do too. That's why they like you guys. But I think for folks who have clean data, we're definitely, speed of analysis, speed to decision making, even just helping with that stuff. We're starting to get into that, and it's exciting. So, great, man. Well, hey, really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you taking some time. Would love to do this again and stay in touch. And fan of what you guys are doing over there. And man, appreciate all that you guys do in the industry.
Man. Nice to chat with you, man. It's a pleasure.
All right, there.